Polls are extremely attractive to newspaper organizations, television stations, broadcasting cable. They have a news void to fill. And as much as we talk about media bias and the media being liberal or conservative, the media does have a bias, and it's a professional bias. They have to create narratives to sustain the interests of their audience. And polls are a wonderful way to do that. Polls provide empirical information, so it doesn't involve, different opinions and different interpretations, but not different opinions. They provide kind of a snapshot into a horse race a lot of times. Most polls consist of or are anchored by trial ballot questions, questions involving who is winning or losing the election. And media organizations love that sort of information. They love to be able to go to their audience and say, Smith is up 2 points and Jones is down 3 points. Tune in next week and see how this unfolds. It's sometimes referred to as the narrative imperative. Right? If I've got to tell a story every day, it's got to have an arc to it. And polls kind of give an assessment of how a race is progressing. Right? So there is a bias in news organizations towards horse race coverage, who's winning and who's losing, and polls really feed that. They provide perfect evidence for that kind of approach to covering politics. Campaigns are different. Campaigns are looking for information on who's up and who's down, but they're also looking to make decisions about deploying resources. So which groups, they go very much into the subtext and take a deep dive into the data. They want to know, am I winning with women versus men, Catholics versus Protestants, Hispanics versus whites or African Americans? How am I doing regionally? And the reason they want that information is they want to adjust messages and they want to deploy resources effectively. Campaigns have limited resources with which to wage a campaign, and they want to make the most effective use of those resources as possible. Polls really facilitate that. Now, there are margins of error. Polls tend not to be very large with respect to subgroups. So if I do a 1,000-person poll in the state of Texas, I'm only going to have, maybe 200, 250 Hispanics. That little subsample comes with a very large margin of error. So I could be wrong in terms of deploying my resources or reading public opinion. But I would rather have that information than not. And that's why campaigns spend so much money on polls. I would argue that they probably ought to spend even more money when it comes to strategically assessing how they're doing and what they ought to be doing with their resources. Right? But of course, in a campaign, the appetite for doing research is only so great. They do want to make informed decisions, but they also want to put one extra television ad on the air or one extra radio spot. So when push comes to shove, research doesn't get quite as highly prioritized as actual campaigning. But if you're going to spend that money, you really ought to know what you're doing. And that's why polls are so attractive to campaigns.